Today we're going to be making my favorite sandwich off the menu. It is one of the very first ones that I came up with. It is called the Morton. It is a meatball sandwich. I named it after my dog, who is a meatball. First thing we're going to do is make a meatball. So for this recipe, it calls for 1 egg, which we're going to have here. Crack the egg into a small mixing bowl. Add some fresh chopped garlic. It's probably about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half per egg. It's we're gonna end up making about 10 meatballs, which is enough for 2 sandwiches. So I like it kind of garlicky, so that's why I'm putting in a little extra garlic. Here we're gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper to the mix before we start mixing it up. Here, before you want to add anything else to this mix, you want to mix up the egg and sort of declump the garlic. You don't want the garlic to be too clumpy, because then it's going to end up going into the meat mixture really clumpy, and then when you bite into a meatball you're going to get a garlic clump, and that's not going to taste very good. So you want to mix it all up nice and evenly. From here we're going to add a little bit of breadcrumb, about 1/3 cup. We use an Italian style breadcrumb for this because it's a meatball. Adds a little Italian flavoring to it. Right now I'm just mixing the egg mixture in with the breadcrumbs so that it's somewhat even. From here we're just going to add the meat and just mix it up real well with our hands. So to mix the meat I'm going to put on a pair of gloves because I don't like to get meat hand. I recommend using gloves in the kitchen as often as possible. Keeps you from having to wash them too terribly often. This is just a basic ground beef that I use for this. Just put that in. And now you're just going to mix it all up in the bowl real nice. Try and get all your breadcrumb mixed thoroughly throughout. Once it looks even, you're pretty much ready to start forming your meatballs. So from here, you're going to want to get a sheet pan. At this point you probably should have preheated your oven to 400 degrees. With the sheet pan you're going to put a little bit of olive oil onto it and grease it up half decently, and then once you do that, start making the meatballs. You're going to want to do them about golf ball size, and so it ends up being about 1.5 ounces per meatball. Actually about 2 ounces per meatball because of the other ingredients, but to make 10 of them with this you're going to use about 1 pound of meat. So alright, so for this we ended up making about 8 meatballs. I probably made some of them a little too big, but they'll work. So you're going to put them into the oven. Your oven's going to be preheated to 400 degrees. Put them in the oven for about 10 minutes. Take them out 10 minutes later. You want to flip them over, put them in for another 5 minutes, and when they come out they will be nice and browned and look something like this. So your meatballs are now cooked and ready to go. From here we're going to mix them with some sauce, put them in a pan, and get them nice and ready to put into the sandwich. Use about 4 meatballs per sandwich. I have 8 perfectly good meatballs right here, so we could make 2 sandwiches. I like to take the meatballs and slice them into thirds because it makes the sandwich sit a lot better. It's a lot less messy than trying to bite into a full meatball. So you want to slice them about 1/3 of the way, and with your pan, get that heated. I would recommend just throwing them right into your pan. From here you're going to get your marinara sauce. Use any marinara that you like. I'm going to put that right over the top. You want to stir these around. You want basically, I don't like to sauce them too much. You kind of just want to get each meatball coated with sauce. Otherwise the sandwich ends up being far too messy if it's too saucy. And if you want, you can give this a little toss. We're going to get the bread ready to go. For the cheeses on this sandwich, I like to use ricotta cheese as well as a mozzarella parm blend that Tillamook makes. It's a great cheese, nice and even. Start with the side of ricotta, and with this you're going to want to just spread it kind of evenly across one side of the bread. And now we're going to go over to the griddle. So for butter, when we make sandwiches at the grilled cheese grill, we always use melted butter and we brush it onto the bread. I don't recommend buttering the grill because you're going to end up with burnt butter and that's going to soak into your sandwich and it's not going to taste very good. So take one side, throw it on the grill. Take the other side and throw it onto the grill. Now we're going to use the shredded cheese for this one and just throw that over top of the other slice of bread. I also like to add a little salt and pepper to the ricotta. It gives it a little more flavor. The meatballs are over here getting nice and hot and saucy. The sauce is kind of soaking into the meatball. We like to grill our sandwiches here open-faced so that both sides get an even cook at the same time. Melts the cheese on both sides. If you have an extra pot lid, you can take a pot lid and throw it over top. The meatballs look ready, so at this point you could transfer those onto one side of the sandwich. That'll help melt the cheese from the top, from the heat of the meatball. If you lose one, that's okay. We could always get it back later. I'm just kind of spreading them around now so that the sandwich is fairly even. Cover that one. We can check this one, see what it looks like underneath. Starting to get a nice golden brown color. If your grill is heated correctly, we usually heat it at about 375 to 400. If it's heated correctly and you're doing it right, the bread should be browning pretty much right at the same time that the cheese is nice and melted. Guessing that under this side the cheese is going to be melted. So at this point you want to fold the sandwich closed. Give it a nice press to kind of press everything together. Makes for a nice sort of cohesive sandwich. You don't want it to be falling apart. You want to get that cheese to kind of lock everything inside. You can flip it again. Give it another press. Couldn't hurt to leave it off to the side of the grill where it's going to be a little cooler. Throw a lid on it for a couple seconds. I think this thing's ready. A nice cut down the middle. And that is the Morton.